Good morning, everyone. Usually today we learn a from a book which is called Torah Or. These are discourses which were given by the first Lubavitcher Rebbe about 250 years ago, Rabbi Shner Zalman. But today, or this week, I would like to learn a series of discourses. Actually, it's one discourse. It has several paragraphs from the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak. And the reason being because next week on Tuesday, on Wednesday rather, Tuesday night, will begin the day that the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak, passed away. And 1 year later, officially, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, his son-in-law and his successor, took over. Lubavitcher Rebbe. Oh. Good morning, everyone.
Hello, good morning.
So this week we will learn, God willing, the Hasidic discourse, the Ma'amar, the essay, which is written by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe. It was said by the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, and it was said like in the early 1920s, 1926 or something like that. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe took over from his father. There was the fifth Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Shalom Dovber. The previous Lubavitcher Rebbe took over from him in 1920 when he passed away. And the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe passed away in 1950, 30 years later. Approximately the first 30 years of his life was in communist Russia, battling against the communists, which his victory was only made evident in like 1990 when the whole communist government fell down. And then the next 10 years he lived in Poland, where he stayed until the World War II broke out. And I think you know the story about how he was imprisoned in Russia by the communists, and he was sentenced to death, and he miraculously got out. And then that was the first 10 years of his life. The second 10 years of his life was in Poland, and there he strengthened the Chabad movement and his teachings. And in the last 10 years of his life, he came to America. He came to America in 1940. He was already pretty paralyzed. He was brought into America on a wheelchair. So in the last 10 years of his life, that's when he really began spreading out Judaism in a really serious way. He established what, if you call it, Chabad houses or Chabad emissaries in Morocco and Tunisia and in various places in the USA. Okay. So he passed away in 1950. And he ordered that before he passed away, that there was a whole series of 20 paragraphs that he wanted to be passed out on Yud Shvat. Yud Shvat, first of all, is the day that his grandmother passed away, Rabbinit Rivka. Rabbinit Rivka, she passed away. She was the wife of the Rebbe Marash, the fourth Rebbe Chabad. That's when she passed away. So, and it ended up he also passed away on that day. He didn't know he was going to pass away on that day, but he did. Even though the fact is he was very paralyzed, nobody could understand what he said except for his son-in-law. It was his successor. But nevertheless, it came as a tremendous shock when he actually passed away. And but 1 year later, it transformed to hope because his successor took over. Now that at that time, people knew that the Rebbe, that our Rebbe, that he was a genius and that he was a tremendously wise person. His advice was, but the degree that he exhibited after he became Rebbe was just simply super human in his care for other human beings, especially for the Jews, and his bravery and courage in spreading out Judaism. So this, we look at this mimer that we're learning now as the will and testament of the previous Rebbe for our generation. And the Rebbe said many, many times, right? Our Rebbe said many, many times, our Rebbe said many times that the previous Rebbe, he was the Moshiach. And the fact is, he didn't really have to say it because it's clear in the Rambam and Maimonides that he had all the qualifications of Mashiach. But because the Rebbe said it, so there must be a lot hidden in there. And it also makes it a lot more, how do you say, mandatory to listen to what he said and take his advice, the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, because that's one of the main aspects of Mashiach, is that he's going to be a teacher. And the Maimonides, for instance, when the Maimonides lists the qualifications of Mashiach, so it says that he's going to force everybody to walk in the ways of Judaism, and the Rebbe explains it means he's going to educate everybody. But he makes two different stages in Mashiach, the Maimonides. There's one stage where he's considered to be Mashiach, and then there's when he's certainly Mashiach. So considered to be Mashiach, and in Kabbalah and Hasidut especially, they explain many more levels, the things that are going to happen. And the first has already happened, right? That the nations don't oppress the Jews anymore. There's no place where Jews are oppressed anymore. But the idea of education, that all the Jews will become aware of the creator of the universe and the truth of the Torah, that we're still working on. But it's increasing more and more every day. So the one reason why there has to be what's called Chezkat Mashiach, and there's a person that we can assume is the Mashiach, is because you have to listen to what he says. You have to find whoever that person, whoever you think it is, if he has the qualifications of Mashiach. So you have to listen to his teachings, and you have to follow his teachings, and you have to, how do you say, embody his teachings, his in thought, speech, action, attitude. And so if you think that, Mr. X is Mashiach, so you have to do what he says. If you think Mr. Y is Mashiach, you have to do what he says. In the Talmud in Sanhedrin, it says that each one of there's one section over there in Tzaddik Tes, Tzaddik Ches, where it talks about that the different rabbis, each one said that their rabbi, their teacher, he was the Mashiach. And because that's the idea of Mashiach to teach. Okay, here we go. Teach. So here we go. This is the connection between the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, who was the Mashiach, and the Rebbe who is the Mashiach, carrying out the previous will of the Mashiach. So it's very important to pay attention to each and every word that you say over here, that's being said over here. And even if you might disagree, which everybody has the right to disagree, I mean, that's a big thing in Judaism, is disagreeing. It's the nature of the Jews, and in some ways it's almost a commandment to disagree. In other words, you have to find something that you agree with. It has to be inside of you. You can't just do things because I say, or because your parents say, or because somebody else says. You have to think about it and see if it really resonates inside of you or not. That's what it means. Mashiach will educate everyone. Just imagine it. There's billions of religion. There's 8 billion people in the world. How many of them are Jews? Like 20 million or something like that, 25. If you say that the Rebbe said there could be more Jews in Russia, so let's say that there's 40 million Jews. Let's say 40 million Jews. But there's a lot of, subtract 40 million from 8 billion, you got a lot of people. And all these people, they don't have the right idea what God is. They don't have the right ideas. And 90% of the Jews also don't have the right idea of what God is. And those percentage of the Jews that do have the idea what God is, a big percentage of those, they don't actually embody it as they would as so desire. I'm one of them. So that the idea of the Mashiach is that little by little he's going to make everybody enthusiastic about being themselves. Not only the Jews, also the non-Jews. So here we go. Ready? Here we're going to learn. Shabbos Parshas Bo, Yud Shvat, Tavshin Yud. As I say, this was a discourse that was said by the previous Rebbe and I think it was like 1926 or something. I looked it up. I can't find it. 1926, 1927, and he just took this mime and he said that it should be reprinted and distributed for everyone to learn on the 10th day of Shvat, and it ended up that he himself passed away on that day. Here we go. Bati LGani achoti kala. It begins with a sentence from the Song of Songs. I should don't show this, huh? I show it down Song of Songs. Anyway, let me read it to you. Maybe next time we'll do it. Song of Songs. It's the 5th chapter of the Song of Songs, the first sentence. That's how the beginning of the first. There's 8 chapters in the Song of Songs, and here is how it begins. 1 second. Where is this? It says it's pretty complicated here. This things. It says it's a whole. The Song of Songs is a book written by King Solomon, the wisest man in the world. Here I got it. 5 wisest man in the world, and this is a love song between God and the Jewish people, and the Jewish people and God. So here we go. Here we go. It's a little bit small, but so should I just read it? Bati LGani, I have come to my garden. Bati, here we go. See last sentence. Bati LGani is Shir Hashirim, Song of Songs. Song of Songs. See, here it is. You got it. This is old. The Song of Songs, chapter 5. What does it start off with here? Chapter 5 here. Yeah. Anyway, you have to take my word for here to see. Chapter 5, there it is. Bati LGani, I have come to my garden. This is God speaking. This thing is like mirror image, so I have to balance this thing. Bati LGani, I have come to my garden. My garden, achoti kala, my sister bride. Right? Achoti, okay. Bati LGani, Bati achoti kala, my sister. Arichi, I will smell mori in bismi, some type of incense with my other incense. Achla yori, I'll eat sweet, my sweet honey with divshi, with another type of honey. Shetiti yain, I will drink my wine in chilbi, it's a white wine, and the achlu reim. Eat, my friends, shatu v'shichru dodim, and let us become inebriated. So it's talking about when the temple was born. Of course, King Solomon, he built the first temple, right? He's talking about, this is God speaking, and God is saying, I came to my holy temple, but he calls it a garden. Bati LGani, I have come to my garden, my sister bride. Okay, why is it called a garden? I came to my house. No, he came to my garden. Achoti kala, my sister bride. Be'itam in Midrash Rabbah. It says in the Midrash Rabbah, Midrash, b'makomo, and Midrash on Shir Hashirim, on the Song of Songs. It says, Bati LGani, I have come to my garden. God is saying, I have come to my garden. The holy temple is my garden. Lagan ein kativ kan. It doesn't say, I have come to the garden. LGani, to my garden. Laganuni, to my wedding canopy. A ganuni is a wedding canopy. Now, what's a wedding canopy? If you've ever been at a religious wedding, you'll see that the bride and the groom, they hold a talit or something, a tent over their heads. They hold a tent over their heads. And this tent is a sign of their being united. So God is saying, I have come to my wedding canopy. But it's my wedding canopy. What does it mean, mine? When you go to a wedding, they use the same canopy, the same covering for everybody, right? Usually have a nice cloth or something, a nice, decorated thing, or sometimes a talit, the men put a talit, something nice. They put it on 4 poles, they hold it over it. It's used for everybody. Here, God is saying, no, this is my garden. This is my wedding canopy. What do you mean mine? What he owned it before? Yes, the makom shaya, the place where I was in the beginning. God is speaking here. God is speaking. How can King Solomon speak in the name of God? How can he speak in the name? How can he do anything with it? He was the wisest man in the world. He knew what God was saying. God speaks. The whole Torah is God speaking, right? God speaks to Adam. God speaks to Abraham. God speaks to Noah. God speaks to Bilam, right? God spoke. God speaks. He created the world through his speech. The whole Torah is God's speech. That's God. The Torah is God's inner speech, and the world is God's outer speech. But still, it's God speaking. King Solomon is saying that God is speaking to the Jewish people, and he is saying, when I build a temple, when the temple is built, I have come back to my garden, the place where I was in the beginning. Remember the thing of the garden, right? God made Gan Eden, garden. Adam, the first man, he was in Gan Eden. Who was in Gan Eden with Adam? God. The Iker Shekhinah, that God's main presence, was in the lower worlds. Now, really, we could spend all week just talking about this one thing. There's a whole idea of tachtonim and elyonim and tachtonim. But the whole basic question, the mystery is, and only the Jews got it right, because God gave them the Torah, that this world is where God wants to be. This physical world. But in God's eyes is the most precious, amazing, mystery, joyous wedding place that's possible. The Creator unites with the creation. That's why God made the world. Now, that's the whole idea of the Torah. The Torah is not telling us how to get out of the world. The Torah is telling us how to bring God into the world. This world is called tachtonim. The world is terrible, terrible. The world is awfully misleading and frustrating. The world can drive you crazy. It's overwhelming. You're one little person. There's 8 billion people in the world. How are you going to make it right? And then you got and the media and everything is driving you even more crazy. You think you're worthless. You're more worthless than you think. Like the joke, the man comes into the psychiatrist and the psychiatrist says to him, Mr. Jones, you have not got an inferiority complex. You really are inferior. The world is trying to tell us that we're inferior, that we're nothing. We're just a little blob of nothing. Better, we shouldn't have been born. If you had children, you get pregnant. Don't give birth. It's better. You shouldn't be here. That life is worth 0. Says the Rebbe. The whole point exactly the opposite. The whole reason, so to speak, that God exists is create the world. This makes no sense, of course, because why does it make no sense? Because God doesn't exist. God creates all existence. God is infinitely more real than anything we can possibly imagine. Anything that we think is real, that exists, is because God creates it. So God is infinitely more real than any sort of, to say that he exists is almost like an insult. It's like saying that God has all the money in the world. He's rich, right? God is more rich than King Solomon was rich. That's ridiculous. He owned the moon. God owned the whole creation. There's no adjective, what it was called, that you can use to describe God. Right? There's no term that you can use to describe how God is great. God is only great in relation to the world. But the main thing by God is the world. God wants to reveal his essence, Iker Shekhinah, the essence of God, higher than that he's a creator. The reason for creation is because God wants to be here. That's Chabad. This is the motto of Chabad. Dira b'tachtonim, putting the essence of God in this world. That's what God wanted. That's why he created man, put man in the world to improve the world. La'avda l'shamra, to improve the world. Where did he put him in? And he put him in Gan Eden. He put him in heaven on earth. And it wasn't good enough. God said, I want you to make it better. I want you to be here in this world. There's going to be challenges. You overcome these challenges, and that gives me tremendous pleasure. That's why, my existence becomes worthwhile. God. So to speak, when we do what God wants, God gets pleasure. Without the world, God doesn't get pleasure. What does this mean? I have no idea, but right, God is not our competitor. God is not, either it's God or me. God is creating me. He just wants it to be in tune. It's a dot. That's what happened by means of the sin of Adam. Is nistalka that went away. A shechina me'eretz l'rakia. The shechina went away from the earth to the heavens. Suddenly you didn't feel God so much. Like a person that steals, a thief. The first time he steals, he feels a little bit bad, maybe. The second time he steals, it doesn't feel so bad. The third time, he doesn't feel bad at all. And the fourth time he steals, he just tries to figure out ways to make it better. He doesn't feel anything. No conscience doesn't bother him at all. Exactly the opposite. The conscience is a deterrent. Is a, how do you say? It's interruption. No, that's not the word I want. Bothers him anyway. What do you guys? What's conscience then? I remember once reading some of the they had excerpts from diaries from these Nazis, from SS guys, and they said, in the beginning they started to feel bad about killing all these women and children, and suddenly they realized, Himmler came and talked to them, and they realized that this was a very noble and great thing that they were doing to overcome this, their weakness and this. And so it's the same thing. At first you feel I'm doing something bad, and then after that you don't feel bad about it anymore. You don't feel bad. The Shekhinah went away from the earth. That was from Adam. Then after that there was the sin of Cain. Cain killed his brother, right? He killed it. Then the next generation was Enosh. Enosh, it says they worshipped idols. Nistalko Shekhinah, the Shekhinah went away. God's presence. He created the world so that man would overcome his nature and do what God wants in the world. And it happened exactly the opposite. Man did not want to overcome his nature at all, and therefore they drove God's presence more and more away. But afterwards, Bedor Mabul, the generation of the flood, the Shekhinah, God's presence went away, so to speak, from the third to the fourth. That's like I was saying, a person, he steals, but he goes out and he kills one time, feels bad. Two times, it doesn't feel so bad, a little bit. Third time, fourth time, he's already bragging about it. And this happened 7 generations, one after the other. God's presence, so to speak, departed from the world. Like it says in the Midrash Rabbah, on the sentence Vayishma et kol Hashem Elokim mitalich bagan. It says that Adam, after he ate from the tree, the fruit of the tree of good and bad, so he heard the sound of God walking in the garden. But it doesn't say walking in the garden. It says being walked. Omer Rabba says Mahalach Inkasiv. It doesn't say that God is walking. Ella mithalech, that God is being walked. He's being pushed, so to speak, or he's pushing himself. Kafitz v'azol. God is jumping away, and more jumping and going. In other words, God was driven away from the world by man. And afterwards, Amdu Shivur Tzadikim, there stood up 7 righteous people, and they defied nature, and they brought down God's presence from above to below. Now, interestingly enough, Noah is not one of them. Noah is not considered to be the first Jew, even though he defied his whole generation. But Noah's thing is that he just turned from bad. It was an amazing thing that he did. He just turned from bad. He tried to tell everyone that they're wrecking the world, right? But he didn't spread of what they're supposed to do. He didn't teach everybody what they were supposed to do. His main thing was Avram was the first person to actually go and teach people what to do, and no one wanted to hear him, of course. It says he got thrown into a fiery furnace and that they tried to cut off his head. There's also amazing stories about Abraham. But Abraham had to defy the whole world to the point that's why it's called the Ivri. The whole world was against him. Ivri means on the other side. He was on one side and the whole world was on the other side. What was Abraham battling? He was battling selfishness. People lived for themselves. They were very spiritual. They worshipped idols. There was a lot of idolatry. There weren't, I don't know if in Abraham's age there was such a thing as an atheist. No such thing. Everybody knew that there was higher powers, and everybody knew they're going to die someday, and nobody knew what tomorrow was going to bring. And people but had idols, but it was all for themselves. Abraham was the first person to think, I am going to live only for the Creator. What does the Creator want? And he thought about it until he realized what God wanted. He got the 7 Noahide commandments, and it says that he even understood the whole Torah before it was given. Nevertheless, Abraham was the first person that said, I am going to make this world the way that Adam was supposed to. When did Abraham come along? 2,000 years after Adam. The world waited for 2,000 years for Abraham to come along. He merited, and he brought the Shekhinah down from the 7th to the 6th. In other words, he didn't really feel any results whatsoever, but he just believed what he was doing was right. Yitzchak, he was certain. Yitzchak, his son, he continued the work of Abraham, fixing the world. He brought the Shekhinah down from the 6th to the 5th until came Moses. Comes along Moses, and Moses is the number 7. He's the 7th of these, right? The evil generations drove the Shekhinah away 7 levels, so to speak, and the Jews, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, etc., they came and brought it down until Moses. Moses was number 7. The Horidu Lamata Ba'oretz, and he brought the Shekhinah back to the world like it was in the time of Adam, but not the whole world like it was in the days of Adam. Adam was supposed to have worked and made the whole world. Moses brought it down where? In the Holy Temple. The Ikar Gila, the main revelation of God, was Beit HaMikdash, in the tabernacle. Tabernacle was also called the Beit HaMikdash. Asali Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocha. The Ketib, like it says, Asali Mikdash v'shachanti b'tocha, make me a holy temple, and I will dwell inside of them. B'tocho, no ne'amar, it doesn't say I will dwell inside of it. Elo b'tocham, inside of them. Who is them? The Jews. Here we got a new thing. After Moses, everyone is a holy temple. Every Jew is a holy temple. What was the essence in the holy temple, the Holy of Holies? What was there? The tablets that Moses got, the Torah. Adam was supposed to have made the whole world into a holy temple, but he didn't. In fact, he just made the world worse. He covered over the good that was hidden. This is a very basic principle also of Judaism, and this is the thing which is going to bring the whole world to drop all the religions. According to Judaism, the world is good. According to Judaism, man is good. Man is made in the image of God. Man is good. We're not just talking about the Jews, we're talking about also the non-Jews. We're talking the world is good. We're not just talking about Israel, we're talking about everywhere. Everything that God creates has some good in it. Sometimes this good can be concealed, but the essence of everything is good, to the degree that everything that's called bad in Judaism, that's against the Torah, is called klippa. It's a shell. It's just the shell that hides the good which is inside of everything. There are certain creations that are just shells, and those have to be done away with, but we're not talking about that now. The main thing, the point is that everything is good, everyone is good, and that's the job of the Jews, is to reveal the good inside of everyone. If someone tells you that man is cursed and that if you don't do X or Y, you're gonna burn in hell, because you're gonna burn in hell everywhere. Anyway, this is a big lie. This is not so. Every man is good. We're taken for the first, and that's what pushed Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob and all to work, because they knew essentially everyone is good, and the way the world is, not feeling this goodness or godliness, if you want to call it the same thing, is not the way it's supposed to be. We got to heal the world. The Zeo, this is what it means, tzaddikim yirshu oretz. That's what it means, that tzaddikim will inherit the earth. V'yishkanu la'ad aleon, they will dwell forever on it. The tzaddikim yirshu oretz, the tzaddikim will inherit the earth. What is the earth? Gan Eden, heaven on earth. They can make this world into heaven on earth. Why? Mipenei, because Gan Eden was where Adam was. Mipenei ma, why? Lefishaim mashkini, because they dwell. Don't say they dwell, but they make dwell. Hainu mamshichin, they draw down. Bechin shochen ad. God is also called the Shekhinah. They draw God's presence down. Shochen ad marom kadosh. We say this in our prayers. That it'll be revealed here in the world, and that's the whole reason for creation. When we do what God wants, God gets pleasure, and that reveals God in the world. Because that's why God created the world, that the world should be a garden, not a field. A garden is a beautiful place. You ever go walking and see a good garden, a beautiful garden? It's a pleasure to be in a really beautiful garden. I don't know if there is such a thing. I remember my mother, a blessed memory, she liked to make a garden in the backyard. She made a rock garden. I remember she had rocks. She ordered the whole thing, and she planted different flowers. And I used to go and look at the flowers, the trees. It was nice. It was beautiful. You could just sit down. It was just calming. It was beautiful, right? Well, that's the way the world is. The world is supposed to be a garden, a place of God's pleasure. God gets pleasure in the world. Okay, considering that we don't know what God is. I mean, God is not a thing. He's not a person. He's not an angel. So this is mysterious of the mysteries. But that's us. That's me and you. That God wants to be revealed here in the world. That's called dira b'tachtonim, a dwelling in this world. V'zeu Bati LGani. That's what it means. I've come to my garden. LGanuni, makom shaya ikri b'techila, the place where ikro b'techila, the place where he was in the beginning. The ikr shechina, that God's main presence was in this physical world. And this is where God wants to be. Now, again, what happens when God is revealed in the world? We've talked about this a lot of times. It's like a person that's healthy, right? Take a person that's in a coma, and he could be that he's a wonderful person, an intelligent person. He knows Torah. He's got a sense of humor. He cares about others. He helps others. He plays the piano, right? He's a doctor. He helps. He heals. He does everything, but he's in a coma. Nothing. But he's still there. There he is. Once in a while, maybe he moves around a little bit. He has a dream or something like that. Well, that's what we're like. And God's presence being revealed in the world means everything wakes up. Suddenly, all the potential which is in the world becomes revealed. And that's what we want, that God should be revealed here in this physical world. We have no idea how wonderful, how godly, how miraculous this world is, and every detail, and every human being. Once in a while, we get little flashes of it, right? Parents with their children, children with their parents, good friends, one another, honesty, bravery, right? The genius, sometimes they get beautiful music, beautiful painting, beautiful this, right? You can see a little bit of beauty, something that's a little sort of a spark of something above this world. It's like this. But we're saying the Torah is what will reveal the source of all this beauty and harmony and love in the world. Infinite potential will be revealed. The inyan the whole intention of the creation of the world, and the Tava Kodesh Baruch Hu, that God wanted the litlo that he should have, dira b'tachtoni, a dwelling in the physical world. So here it comes. This is the motto of Chabad. I think I've told you this story, but it's worthwhile telling it again. This is the mission statement of Chabad, dira b'tachtoni. This happens to come from a midrash, I think a midrash Tanchuma. Midrash. There's a lot of other reasons for creating the world. There's a lot of other midrashim, and according to Kabbalah, that God created the world to show his powers. God created the world to do benefit for his creations. God created the world, that we should recognize his greatness. So there's and other reasons. Show how good he is, how powerful he is, how wise he is. We appreciate God. But Chabad says no. The reason, those are all true. Those are all true. But the main reason is dir b'tachtonim. God wants to be here. So there was once someone that came to the Rebbe, and he said that there's people that are complaining about the Lubavitcher Rebbe, people, big rabbis. And so he said, what is the complaints? He said, well, they say that first of all, the Rebbe doesn't consult with any other rabbis. He just does things on his own. He just does things that are totally unorthodox. And he tells him he should at least, take advice from other people, at least, consult, see what other people think. He said, no, what's the second thing? He says, the second thing is, what's this thing about dira b'tachtonim, to make a dwelling for God in this world? What does this mean? It's just some midrash. There's so many other reasons. Why did Chabad pick this reason? So the Rebbe said, well, he smiled. He said, well, one answers the other. Because nobody understands what I mean and how important it is by this idea of dira b'tachtonim, making God revealed here. None of the other rabbis understand it, so I have nobody to talk to. I have no one to take advice. That what does it mean? That should be revealed God below, by means of the service of man. That's the Holy Temple. What's the Holy Temple? That God was revealed. People would go to the Holy Temple. They would go 3 times a year. They would offer sacrifices. That's serving. They would do what God wants there. And we'll talk about a lot about sacrifices later. What's the point of it? Because it seems totally nonsensical to bring an animal. We'll talk about that. But the main idea is that God should be revealed here in the world. People went to the Holy Temple 3 times a year. What did they see? They saw and they felt that they're being created. Everyone felt that they're being created. And they're being created, and that they're being created by God, and that they have, I mean, who else would create a person? To create, and that everyone is being created for a purpose. Everyone's important. Everyone is important, not just to the world, that's also true, but they're important to God. Everyone is important to God. And what's the most important thing to God? God, the world. Everyone is important to God, that we can do something to improve the world. Everyone. And according to the Torah, we have the instruction book, we have the commander, we're commanded, we're being created. People went to the Holy Temple and they went happy. Moadim l'simcha. They came back home, they were happy. The idea is to make the whole world happy. This to serve God, reveal God below in this world like it was in the temple by means of our service. By means of self-control and self-transformation. Or willpower and pleasure. You use your willpower to do good, force yourself to do good, what you know is good, to force yourself to refrain from doing what's bad, force yourself. And that brings to eshapcha, you transform yourself, you actually enjoy doing what's good, doing what God wants. And you actually hate what God doesn't want. That's eshapcha, transform yourself. That's what we're put into this world, to do these 2 things, which are defying nature and transforming nature. The neshama, tered lamata, the soul comes down below to be in the body. And the animal soul, what's the animal soul? The human soul. It's called an animal in comparison to the godly soul. The godly soul is so godly that the animal soul is like an animal compared to it. But the soul, what's the animal soul? Natural desires, natural thought, speech, how do you say? Selfishness, ego, natural ego. That's what's the body? The body is your automatic responses. I want to eat, I want to sleep, I want pleasure, I want this. The body takes over. And they conceal, and conceal, they hide over and conceal on the soul, on the light of the soul. And all of this, nevertheless, even though that the soul, the godly soul, is so concealed, tif'ala neshama, the soul can bring about birur v'zichach haguf, the purification and the refinement of the body. Birur is usually separating bad from good, and zichuch means that you take the good and you refine it, you make it more clear. Haguf and nefesh b'hamid, and the animal soul. Birur is like you chose yourself a pair of glasses, how you want to look at the world. And zich means you clean the glasses that you pick. Clean the glasses. You look at the world in a better way, in a more positive way, in a more dynamic way. That we're put into this world so that the body, not just to ignore or to survive the body and the natural soul, but to transform. And even more to refine the body and the natural soul so that they automatically want to do what God wants. But Gam also and even to transform the area that we are in the world. That's what it means, make me a holy place, and I will dwell inside of them, inside of each and every one of them. Each and every one of us is a holy temple, and we have to serve like they did in the Holy Temple, avodas birurim, that we have to do this refinement, the bechinas eskafia beshapcha, by forcing ourselves to do good and to turn from bad, and even more, feeling the goodness, enjoying doing what God wants, and despising what God rejects. Despising anger, despising depression, Right? I'm not going to get into that. I'm not going to get angry. I'm not going to be depressed. That's all. I'm not going to have desire, lust. I'm not going to do it. Right? I'm not going to do it. That kafia means I'm forcing myself. I want to do it, but I'm not going to. Or I don't want to do what's good, but I'll force myself to do it. And eshabcha means I enjoy doing good and I hate doing what's automatic. Right? Like if you go into a restaurant, somebody brings you a dead cat to eat. You order whatever's a steak. They bring a dead rotten cat with all sorts of worms. That's how you look at depression and aggression and can't do it. This mainly comes, this eshabcha, it comes from feeling God. It's automatic. You feel what's good. So what a lot of people, they become depressed, they become depressed, aggressive, they become addiction because they have no self-awareness, no self-esteem. They don't know who they are. They don't feel that they're creations of God. They don't feel worth anything. As soon as you feel you're worth something, then automatically you don't want to do bad things. And you do want to do what's good things. Like it says, like it says, when we push away, this is working on yourself. When a person uses his willpower and transforms and controls the sitra achra, the other side is like the klippa. The other side, the essence of the world is good. The things that are bad, that's called the other side. Estalik Yakora, then God gets pleasure from this, and there spreads out the glory of God in all the worlds. We're going to talk about this in a moment because the word estalik means to go away, but it doesn't in this case. When we do what God wants, God gets pleasure. Of course, you can ask, well, how can God get pleasure? God is not a person. God is not a thing. So yes, it's true, but how does God command us the commandments? How did God create the world? He must have some sort of a way of articulating himself. If he created a whole world, and not just he created it, he's creating it right now. So God obviously has will, and he has wisdom, and he also has pleasure. That what it says, that God is spread out. When we do what God wants, it's spread out in all the worlds. Hakavana al madrigas, or it's a type of revelation of God. The hubakula almin b'shavin, it's everywhere equally. Okay, we're in a world, right? And we're in a world, and we have identities, and we have. It's impossible for us to comprehend what God is. But on the other hand, we're being created. Here we are. How are we being created? So there's all sorts of scientists and religions and things that have all sorts of ideas of how it is. And all those ideas are, sometimes even logical and reasonable and practical even, but they're false. They're not right. The fact of the matter is that God is totally, totally beyond any comprehension. Beyond, even to say that God is beyond comprehension, that's an insult to God. It implies that, that God could be understood. We just haven't got, the comprehension is not the proper vehicle, not even the comprehension of the angels to understand what God is. Like I said before, God doesn't really exist. He creates all existence. He creates the spiritual. God is not spiritual. He creates the spiritual. That's, on the other hand, what is God creating the world from? He's creating the world from nothing. Every single instance is being created from nothing. So God personally is creating everything from nothing. So he's infinitely close to us. So he's infinitely close to us and he's infinitely far from us. And God himself is creating all the worlds. So that's what it means. God himself is creating the worlds, but God himself, and what is he creating? There's nothing except for God. All there is God. So he's creating all the worlds, and he's in all the worlds equally. This is like the essence of God. That's what Adam was supposed to have drawn into the world, to make the world infinitely meaningful. Every detail in the world, details. Not the world is going to go away. Haino or a Soviet, this is in Kabbalah, this is called the light which surrounds all the worlds. When we do a little thing that God wants in this world, or we refrain from doing something which God does not want, this gives God pleasure, believe it or not, and it reveals the light of God which shines in all of the worlds equally. And this is what we'll stop today. We'll talk about the differences between the worlds, the upper worlds and the lower worlds, God willing, tomorrow.